All right, well, looks like we got a few members here. In the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. Today is the February 18th meeting of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. Would you like to take roll call, Carol, to get us started?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Chair Solomon,
Here.
Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Vice Chair Bovet,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman,
I'm here.
Commissioner McPherson,
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Commissioner Norton, Senator Przanski, and Representative Lewis. So we do have enough for a quorum with those members who are in attendance.
Great. And did we have anybody signed up for public comment today?
I did not get any requests for a public comment.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I believe Shelby's going to talk us through the grant adjustment for Springfield's organized retail theft request. And this was one that we had requested additional information on. So Shelby, if you're ready.
Absolutely. Just one moment. I'll share my presentation.
Great.
Okay, just to confirm, are you able to see that title page?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, so good afternoon, Chair Solomon and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Shelby Grauer, and I am a grant coordinator at the Criminal Justice Commission. I presented Springfield's budget adjustment request at the January Commission meeting, and as Chair Solomon stated, I'm here today to provide additional information as requested by the Commission. So just a quick reminder of the adjustment process. A commission approval is required when an adjustment request includes the reallocation of 10% or more of the total grant award, or if there's a request to add, remove, or substantially change an existing program. Otherwise, staff is authorized to process other adjustment requests. Springfield's budget adjustment came before the commission because it requested to reallocate more than 10% of their overall budget award. Springfield Police Department requested to move $93,600 in unspent funds from various categories to purchase a license plate reader camera system. This system includes stationary cameras that can be placed at high commerce traffic areas as both a deterrent and a detection tool. Cameras will only capture images from publicly accessible roadways and will not be mounted on or operated from vehicles. Springfield intends to mount cameras on existing infrastructure, including light and utility poles as an example, as well as permitted 12-foot poles installed on city properties. Springfield reports that prior to deployment, the department will establish a policy in alignment with industry standards and best practices. As previously discussed at the January meeting, funds will be reallocated from contractual services, equipment, supplies, and training and travel as outlined on this slide. Chair Solomon, I'll pause here for discussion and voting. I do have one more slide with motion language if that would be helpful.
Well, let's stop here right now. I think this addressed some of my concerns. I thought these were going to be in vehicles. But I want to open it up for questions or comments that other commissioners might have. Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead with the motion language.
Absolutely.
Well, that looks pretty straightforward. Is there someone who would be willing to make a motion to that effect?
This is Vice Chair Bovet. Motion to approve Springfield's organized retail theft grant program budget adjustment as requested.
Is there a second?
This is
And
Freeman.
I'll
I'm happy to second it.
All right. I think Commissioner Freeman got in there first. All right. So we have a motion on the table made by Vice Chair Bovet, seconded by Commissioner Freeman. Carol, would you please take roll?
Of course. Chair Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bovet,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson.
Yes.
Then it passes.
All right. Thank you, Shelby.
Commissioner Norton's in the room.
Oh, great. Oh,
Didn't see you
Commissioner Norton.
here.
Yeah, you're here.
Yay!
And I will also vote yes.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Commissioner Norton.
Super. All right. Next up, we're going to hear from Adeline about the grant adjustment for Jackson County's Adult Treatment Court.
Hi, can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, hello everyone. For the record, my name is Adeline Padlina, and I am the Treatment Court Grant Program Coordinator. And I will be bringing Jackson to you, but I actually have a second one as well that maybe didn't make the agenda. Before we talk about Jackson Adult Drug Court, we're going to talk about Lincoln County Family Treatment Court. So they also have a budget adjustment request. They are requesting movement of $12,000 from personnel to training and travel. These funds were originally planned to fund a parole and probation officer, but there has been a hiring delay. Now, they do have staff that are dedicated to the program while probation works to address those staffing shortages, and they would leave some funds available for when they do hire that officer. But in the meantime, they want to use some of these additional funds to send at least 5 staff members to the RISE conference. This conference is very popular among our treatment courts. And has a lot of different things that folks can learn about. It's going to be in Florida at the end of May. And this is coming to you all because it's over 10% of their total budget.
Great. Any questions from commissioners about this request? Great. Do you have motion language? Or we can just, I think we can handle this if you don't have something written up.
I have a very brief summary, but I also believe in you.
Great. Is there someone that's willing to make a motion to approve the Lincoln County Family Treatment Court's request to move $12,000 from personnel to training and travel?
So moved.
Great. Is there a second?
So Vice Chair Bovet, I'll second that motion.
All right. We have a motion made by Commissioner Beach, seconded by Vice Chair Bovet. Carol, roll please.
Chair Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bovet,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton.
Yes.
Then it passes.
Great.
Now we'll get to
Jack.
Jackson
Great.
County Adult Drug Court. So they are requesting moving $8,227.94 from contractual services to housing and facilities. So these funds were originally planned to fund a UA assistant for their weekends and holidays. They previously didn't have any weekend or holiday drug testing, and so they weren't quite sure how to budget for it when they wrote their initial budget. And as of now, they have a surplus of funds. So they would like that money to instead be used to fund some new line items in their housing and facilities category. And those would be for housing incentives and Oxford and sober housing. So they previously did not have these housing funds, and because of that, it's considered a program change. Now, I do want to kind of clarify what they're asking for because it is a little different than what you might be thinking. So the way that their court works, as many courts do, their treatment provider, the ARC, purchases participant incentives. And so those incentives come in a lot of different ways, but one of them is often gift cards for local merchants. And so if a participant does something really well, their name gets entered into a drawing for one of these gift cards. Now, if a participant chooses to do the drawing, they get it, and they say get a $25 card to Walmart, say. If they so choose, they can, instead of taking that gift card, they could put that $25 towards their housing costs. And so if they did that, that is where these funds would come in place. Those funds would come from this line item. So it's not quite your traditional just straight across housing. It would be incentives for housing.
And so that's for the housing incentives. Then for the Oxford housing, I'm assuming that would be, stipends
Yes,
of some
correct.
sorts that would be made available to participants that need recovery housing.
Correct. It would help pay for their rent and move-in costs.
Right. Okay. Any questions from Adeline about this request? All right. Is there someone willing to make a motion to move $8,227.94 from Jackson County's adult drug court from the contractual services line to housing and facilities?
We'll move to approve the Jackson County request as described by the chair.
Great. Is there a second?
Commissioner Norton seconds.
Super. We have a motion made by Commissioner Freeman, seconded by Commissioner Norton. Would you please take roll, Carol?
Of course. Chair Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bovet,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton.
Yes.
Then it passes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adeline. All right, Lindsay, I think you are going to talk to us about justice reinvestment, the grant solicitation.
Yes, thank you. Just getting my slides started. Can everyone see the first slide there?
Yep.
Great. All right. So good afternoon, Chair Solomon and commissioners. For the record, I am Lindsay Collins, and I am the Justice Reinvestment Program Manager at CJC. This briefing provides an overview of the solicitation changes for your review. No action is required unless the Commission determines that additional criteria should be added. The 2025-2027 JRP grant solicitation will be released in early March 2025. The total available funding and the formula for the formula grant will be determined at the conclusion of the 2025 Oregon legislative session. Funding is used to assess individuals and provide a continuum of community-based sanctions, services, and programs to reduce recidivism and state prison usage while maintaining public safety and accountability. So going into the formula grant, no real, no changes to the formula grant solicitation verbiage. Kind of at the end, we'll have that time to discuss any additional criteria that you all may want to add. For the competitive grant, this is where some of the changes are coming in. So just a little
before you move to the competitive grant, on the formula grant, can you remind me, the formula, isn't it the same as the grant and aid formula? That's what's used to determine the county allocations?
Yes, Chair Solomon, that is the CSL formula that is used then to distribute that funding.
Okay, great, thank you.
So just a little background on kind of what we've been working on these last 2 months. We've been engaging in direct outreach with the 2023-2025 competitive grant awardees to gather insights and preferences on funding reduction strategies. We also conducted a competitive grant survey of all prior JRP grant applicants to gain broader feedback on how to better support applicants and refine the funding reduction process. So some of our key findings from that feedback, we haven't completed our analysis yet, and we will present that data to you in April. but preliminary analysis indicates a strong preference for providing applicants with reduction strategies as early as possible, ideally by the time that final application phase opens in June. Many respondents indicated that funding for personnel was the most impactful use of competitive grant resources. So the changes that we're bringing you today, we are to improve internal planning and reduction strategy discussions. We are requiring applicants to opt in during the preliminary application phase to be eligible to apply in the final application for competitive grant funding. This change ensures we have a clearer picture of the number of applicants much earlier in the process rather than waiting until the end of the final application phase. By knowing who intends to apply earlier, we can better analyze potential funding reduction strategies, brief the GRC with more lead time, and allow for a more informed decision-making process within the grant review timeline. Based on the feedback we received, we have updated the solicitation language to specify that competitive grant funds must only support key personnel unless the commission determines additional criteria today. Lastly, we have added language stating funding reduction strategies will be set and released by the commission in May or June. So on the next slide, I'll provide an overview of the proposed timeline for commission discussion, input, and decision around the competitive grant funding reduction strategies and formula approval for the formula grant. Any questions before I move on to the funding or the timeline?
Chair Solomon, I
Yeah.
don't know if now's the right time to do it. I guess I can lower my hand since I'm already talking. But I did want to have a couple of conversations, and we can do it at the end. That's fine. One is, do we need to change the priorities based on the current administration, federal administration? And then two, is there, one of the things that I get worried about is, and I was told this as sitting on the Justice Reinvestment Program, like, oh, you have to support certain county because otherwise people will die. And I'm like, but the competitive stuff should be for new or unique, in my brain, innovative programs, but I could be off. So those are the two areas I do want to discuss. Happy to wait, or however you see fit.
Well, I think this is a good time to kind of talk about it. And just to remind people, this is the competitive grant for downward departure programs that currently exist in, 7 counties? Is that right? How many?
I believe it is 15.
Oh,
counties,
15.
Chair.
Okay, so, and one of the questions I wanted to ask is whether that's increased much over the last two biennia. But before we go there, to your point, Commissioner Norton, the new administration, I don't, and please correct me, Lindsay, but this is all state general fund dollars that fund JRI, so I don't believe they would be impacted at all by the federal administration.
I'm certainly
Um,
not suggesting that, Chair
Mhm.
Solomon. I am really kind of worried about if there is a tightening of DEI funds, and Justice Reinvestment has traditionally focused some of their, priority on making sure certain underrepresented folks are offered this, or it's being offered in the same way. I just don't know if we need to reframe that in anticipation of, I'm trying to be careful.
Mhm.
I don't want to get political, but people's priorities may now be changing, and there may be an increased demand for us to remove that from the allocation, or the priority, I guess. And I just want to have the conversation so we can say we've had it. I personally don't feel like we need to shift. I think, but I think we need to actually have the conversation, and I'm not the only commissioner on here, so I'm just interested in if it even matters to other commissioners.
Well, first, I would love to hear from staff around any thoughts they have about whether they see this as an issue moving forward.
Chair Solomon, Commissioner Norton, thank you for the question. So, we do want to have the conversation and the discussion kind of around what your thoughts and input would be around what reduction would look like in the future for this biennium. in this next timeline, if we can kind of maybe, I'll just move to that slide just so you can have some awareness around it. Excuse me. Do you want to provide that time to have a robust discussion around what those reduction strategies could include or what those funding priorities might look like? So I'd like to just kind of point that out. We have set that aside in our timeline. I do want to make sure that I know there are other commissioners that have a time constraint today. So just to make it clear, we are planning for that. We want the input. We want to have that discussion.
Okay. Other commissioners have thoughts or comments at this time? Okay, so it sounds like we've got time set aside in March to have a fuller discussion on the issue. Does that work for you, Commissioner Norton?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Vice Chair Bovet.
And I'd agree. I'd just add that in March, I think we'll be meeting in person, and we may know more about some of these executive orders that are hitting us almost daily now that we're responding to, that Commissioner Norton's kind of referring to. So I think maybe given another month, we might have a better feel for where we're heading, and maybe the conversation might be a little more valuable then.
Indeed. Thank you. Great. Lindsay.
Okay, so just to kind of go over the timeline, in March we'll gather that GRC input, so that'll be a somewhat informal discussion, but using their input to inform commission discussions in April. So just to clarify, that time that we've set aside will be in April for commission discussion. So back to kind of those points, we'll have a little time to understand what's happening maybe in the federal space to have a more informed discussion. So April, we'll have that discussion with the commission. And then in May or June, we will present to the commission for discussion and decision the recommended funding reduction strategies from all collected and synthesized data. So then, again, depending on that May or June timeframe, the next milestone will be presenting to the commission the funding reduction strategies that we'll take those funding reduction strategies that the commission has decided on and disseminate those to the JRP competitive grant applicants. And so that's just to make sure that they have that early and they can align their applications with those funding reduction strategies.
So Lindsay, let me ask a quick question. So given what's in the governor's budget, which is CSL, if no other new counties applied, ostensibly there wouldn't be a need to employ those funding reduction strategies, would there? It's only if we have new applicants?
Not necessarily, Chair Solomon. So I appreciate that question. That's kind of what we're trying to work through, is getting that feedback from applicants from all counties. Kind of what would you want? How would you want that funding to maybe be distributed? And so we went through that process. And again, I will present all of this kind of in April as like a very comprehensive, this is the step-by-step what we went through to get to this point of what is your recommended decision on funding reduction. But right now the competitive grant is competitive. So applicants can apply and compete and ask for whatever they want, right? So that reduction piece still kind of comes into play.
So was one of the potential criteria to limit applicants to their previous ask plus, some small percentage?
Mm-hmm. Chair Solomon, thank you for the question. So that treatment courts implemented that criteria, and it is definitely something that we can consider. And we can provide as something for the commission to discuss and decide. So that is a possibility. And again, having that opt-in component really helps us focus in on what funding reduction strategies or how we even want to kind of communicate that looks like.
Okay, great. Right, was there more?
And so, no, that's it. That completes my briefing. So pending your questions or any additional criteria, that's it for me.
Okay, just want to make sure, other commissioners, anybody have any additional questions for or comments on this issue? Great. Well, thank you very much, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair Solomon.
All right, moving right along. I believe Director Sanchagrin is out today, so we get to hear from Ryan Keck about everything that's going on right now in the legislature that's related to the CJC.
Yes, sir. It might be a tall order to capture everything.
In 10 minutes, no less.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Ryan Keck, Deputy Director here at CJC. Just going to work through probably a small list of bills that we are monitoring most closely as session is continuing to proceed. Of course, first and foremost, our budget bill was up last week. Ken gave 2 days worth of testimony related to our budget specifically and all programs, as well as a little bit of a deeper dive related to deflection. Went well, seemed to be received well from what we can understand and or have heard directly. Our public hearing, unfortunately, for the 13th was canceled due to snow. And so that will be rescheduled, we're told, but it will not be till March or April. I want to do publicly say thank you to any of you commissioners or anybody else on the line that intended to be there that day and or submit written testimony in support of the agency. We really do appreciate it. The opportunity will be back again, but it's going to be a little bit later. Next bill I'll go over is House Bill 2935. That's the pretrial study bill. That sailed quickly through committee and has actually now cleared the House as of today and moving on to the Senate. That asked us to do a new study on the impacts of the pretrial changes that occurred. Senate Bill 48. I got my numbers right from the past, 48. House Bill 2233 is next on the list chronologically anyway. This is a pass-through grant to the Oregon Justice Resource Center related to providing legal services in the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. That had a public hearing last week. It's scheduled for a work session today as well. This is, I guess, being described as a pilot program. We've done 2 of these pilots in the past where the agency has passed through funds as well as then done an evaluative report and submitted to the legislature. House Bill 2933, that's the sentencing rules changes, the bill that we're obligated to put forward after you all make decisions related to sentencing over the biennium. That is moved out of committee and is waiting for some final House readings. That's the last being scheduled for the 20th. So Thursday, pardon me, of this week. Maybe new to bring to the radar, also on Thursday, pardon me, is Senate Bill 938. So that's a bill that makes changes to the Restorative Justice Grant Program. Particularly, it expands eligibility to entities that can provide resources and services to the specific grant applicants and or programmatic staff, as well as works to position the program for continuous funding. That's scheduled for its, as I mentioned, public hearing in the Senate Judiciary Committee on Thursday. And then lastly, we are just continuing to monitor the Joint Addiction and Community Safety Response Committee. And as they progress, back on the 5th, Vice Chair Bovet presented 2 different bills to that committee that include modifications to our jail-based medication for opioid use disorder grant program, expanding eligibility for that to include transition centers beyond just jails or tribal facilities. Last week, Ken provided Chair?
Yeah, I'm just curious, do you know what's on tap for their committee hearing at the summit next month? Because I know they're scheduled to have a hearing on the second day of the summit.
I have an idea. We're still working through the approval process, but what we are aiming to provide, at least from the agency's side, we're aiming to provide an update on the best practices report that should be published in April, but we'll hopefully get a preliminary kind of preview, I guess, of that work, as well as talk about the most recent data that we have available to us at the point in time. We are working with committee staff on an agenda that includes expertise from other parts of the country on deflection and related services, related programs. The agenda, as I just got a pop up there, is intended to be finalized by next week.
Cool.
So hopefully it gives you a little bit of a preview,
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's
primarily
great.
focused on deflection, kind of what we know, what else we can know about it in that setting.
Yeah, great.
And I'll skip to my other bullet, which was to say between now and then, the committee has scheduled up county presentations. And so the agendas are pretty loose right now, but the intention being to utilize the next couple of committee meetings to hear from the counties in our state that are providing deflection and talking about their programs, how they operate, what's different, and maybe what is needed.
And where will those presentations occur?
Those will be on the Wednesday evening Jasker
Okay, got it,
committee hearings.
got it.
That's my short list.
All right. Questions? I have one, Ryan, about I forget the bill number, the Coffee Creek Legal Clinic. So the agency submits a report to the legislature, some sort of evaluative report. Is that something that we see, the
Yeah.
commission sees? I don't recall seeing it in the past.
It's not a report that we typically say bring forward for sake of approval or anything like that. But yeah, we've published 2 of these reports before. I'd be happy to send you the links to both of them.
That
so
would
you
be
can see.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to take a look at them. Vice Chair Bovet.
I thought I'd just chime in since we have just a few more minutes left anyways, and just update the commission since I'm playing around with things involving the commission's budget. As Ryan mentioned, there were 2 bills presented before the Joint Addictions Committee. One is basically just technical amendments to House Bill 4002 to fix sections that don't work. The other one, House Bill 3009, actually would expand essentially the grant program administered by CJC under 4002 that provides for medication assisted treatment in the jails. It would expand it to community correction centers. I think it has generally broad support. We thought about folding that into the omnibus bill, but I think it's a standalone, and I think it's going to go just as is because we still have a lot more work to do on the omnibus, and there's no reason to delay that. I thought I'd just mention that since that's one of our grant programs. The other thing that Ryan mentioned is the public portion of the CJC budget, which was last Thursday, did get snowed out, unfortunately. I was there. I was ready to go, but I only live a few blocks from the Capitol. And I think I was one of the only people in the building that day. And they continued it. They did tell us probably March or April, because really, in some ways, there's no hurry on the budget bills to move them because that moves at the end of the session, as you're probably all well aware, in Ways and Means toward the end of session. We have offered, and I have offered up with a whole lot of support from other stakeholders, amendments to that bill to provide for current service level funding for one program that was not already in the bill because it wasn't in the governor's recommended budget, and that is the Marijuana Enforcement Grant Program that has 2 important components. One, it funds enforcement against the drug cartels that moved into Oregon a few years ago. I'd like to say we're done clearing those folks out, but we're not, so the program needs to continue. And then the tragic side of it is the other part of the grant program funds for victim services for victims of labor trafficking. And unfortunately, we still have plenty of those right now. So hopefully when we get to the public hearing portion, they'll receive the -1 amendments to House Bill 5005 well. And I think we have growing bipartisan support to make sure that program continues until we've taken care of the underlying problems. So I thought I'd just mention those two things because they affect CJC in the next biennium.
Vice Chair Bovet, can you say a little bit more about the technical fixes bill on 4002? Is it really just kind of language or is there anything substantive in there?
The only thing substantive in the bill is section 17 of the bill, and that is the expansion of the MAT program to community corrections centers. But I think we're going to pull that out of the bill and let House Bill 3009 run on its own because we got more work to do on the omnibus technical corrections bill, which is really about making the automatic expunction provisions work, which is incredibly complex, and we
Right.
still haven't figured it out. Making the pharmacy provisions work, we figured those out, so those are already baked into the -1 amendments or into the bill itself. And then there's various other technical parts of the way the conditional discharge provisions work and other technical sections I could get into that we knew coming out of the short 24 session. We just didn't have time to make them function correctly. So we've now had time to work with the judicial department and other stakeholders to make sure we've got the right language. So once we pull out the expansion of that grant program, in my opinion, there is no real substance to the bill other than making 4002 work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
Other questions for Vice Chair Bovet? Or Ryan? All right. Well, I always believe in running a tight meeting, but I think this is a new record with 3 action items, no less, 37 minutes on a 2-hour meeting. So I think we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all for your time and hope to see you at the summit next month. Looking forward to the event. All right. Take care.